The unexpected encounter continued. The vast expanse of the starry abyss stretched endlessly in all directions as the Vanguard glided through the dark void. The hum of the engines was the only sound breaking the silence, a constant reminder of the delicate dance humanity was performing so far from home. The ship was an engineering marvel, designed for long-range exploration, a symbol of humanity's will to reach beyond the stars. Captain Jane Thompson stood alone on the command deck, her hands clasped behind her back, staring out into the vastness. The stars twinkled in the distance, seemingly indifferent to the monumental event unfolding. For her, the moment was bittersweet. Humanity had long dreamed of exploring the cosmos, but now that they were here, the reality was nothing like the vision of unity and peace that had been promised. "Captain, sensors are picking up something," Lieutenant Hayes reported, his voice breaking through her thoughts. "Something massive. It's unlike any ship we've ever encountered. It just appeared out of nowhere." The captain turned swiftly, her sharp gaze focused on the tactical display. There it was, an enormous vessel, its shape irregular and unfamiliar, floating silently in the dark. It wasn't the standard geometrical shape of typical spacefaring vessels. This one was jagged, almost organic, as if it had grown out of the void itself rather than being built. "How far?" she asked, her voice steady, but the tension in her chest was palpable. "Approximately 50,000 kilometers. It's slowing down, Captain. It knows we're here." A shiver ran down Jane's spine. The Vanguard was the pride of Earth's exploration fleet, yet this alien ship, clearly of a superior technological make, was uninvited and undetected by any of humanity's sensors until now. It seemed as if it had been waiting for them. "Open a direct communication channel," she ordered, her voice calm, betraying none of the apprehension she felt inside. A few seconds later, the communications officer, Ensign Patel, nodded. "Channel open, Captain." No response yet. The main view screen flickered to life, but instead of the usual array of standard alien protocols or attempts to communicate, the display was filled with static, distorted shapes, sharp pulses of light. Something was interfering with the transmission, as though the alien vessel was intentionally scrambling the signal. "Send a hail. Let's see if we can at least get a basic response," Captain Thompson said, her mind racing through possible scenarios. She had spent years preparing for contact with alien civilizations, but no simulation could have predicted this moment. Seconds passed. The silence in the command deck deepened, broken only by the hum of the ship's advanced engines and the occasional beeping of the monitors. The crew, usually so confident, sat rigid in their seats, their faces etched with the tension of the unknown. Suddenly, the screen blinked, clearing the static to reveal an image. A figure, its face elongated and angular, its features something completely alien to humanity's known anatomy. Its skin was translucent, shimmering like light refracted through a dense fog, and its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light of the space around them. The figure was humanoid, but only just. "I am Salthor of the Scorhian Dominion." The voice that emanated from the speaker was deep, vibrating with an ancient authority that seemed to reverberate through the very walls of the Vanguard. "You trespass in our domain. Prepare to face the consequences of your ignorance." There was a brief silence as Captain Thompson processed the words, and for a moment, the entire crew seemed to hold their breath. Scorhian Dominion. She had never heard of them. A new power in the galaxy, or perhaps an old one that humanity had simply overlooked. Either way, this encounter was unlike any they had prepared for. "We come in peace," Captain Thompson replied, her voice steady, but tinged with a firmness that she knew would carry weight. "We are explorers, not invaders. We are seeking knowledge, not conflict." Zalthor's eyes glowed brighter, the alien seemingly studying her, trying to gauge the truth in her words. "Peace," it repeated, the word hanging in the air like a strange echo. "Peace is a concept that has no place in the Scorhian Dominion. You are weak, primitive creatures. You have no place in our galaxy." The captain's mind raced. Weak, primitive. Humanity had only just begun to stretch its legs beyond the cradle of Earth. Yet this alien species seemed to have no interest in diplomacy or the ideas of exploration and cooperation that humanity held dear. "We may be new to the stars, but we fight for our survival," she responded, a hint of defiance in her voice. "We will not back down, and we will not let anyone dictate our place in the universe." There was a long pause, the atmosphere in the command deck thickening with tension. For a moment, it seemed as if the entire galaxy held its breath. Then, Xalthor's figure on the screen shifted, and a cold, almost mocking tone seeped into his voice. "You misunderstand, human. You do not yet comprehend the weight of your defiance. The Scorgian Dominion does not tolerate such insolence." Before Captain Thompson could respond, the screen cut off abruptly, leaving her and her crew in stunned silence. "Captain." Patel's voice was unsure, breaking the silence that had fallen like a heavy blanket over the command deck. "What now?" Her mind was already working, formulating a plan. "We've been challenged, but we're not backing down. We'll show them what humanity is made of." The crew exchanged looks, a mixture of fear and determination in their eyes. For the first time in a long time, they were facing an unknown force. But Captain Thompson knew one thing. Humanity had always thrived under pressure, and they weren't about to let some unknown alien force intimidate them. "We prepare for a response," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "The Scorgian Dominion has underestimated us, but we'll prove them wrong. All hands to battle stations. We make our stand here." The crew scrambled into action, the hum of the ship growing louder as the Vanguard powered up its weapon systems. The tension was unbearable, yet Captain Thompson remained focused. They had only one chance to make this right. Now, humanity's ingenuity and determination would be put to the ultimate test. In the darkness of space, the unknown awaited, but humanity would meet it head-on. They were no longer just explorers. They were warriors for their future, for their right to exist in the stars. And the Scorgian Dominion would learn that underestimating humanity was a grave mistake. An unlikely communication continued. Captain Thompson's mind raced. She had expected a challenge, but this was something entirely different. The Scorgian Dominion's words hung heavily in the air, like an impending storm waiting to break. The fearlessness in their tone was undeniable, yet Captain Thompson felt a flicker of hope deep within her. This was humanity's moment. The screen in front of her remained dark, but she could feel the weight of her crew's stares, the tension that had crept into their every movement. The crew knew their captain well. They could read her thoughts, even without a word. They knew she was already formulating a response, trying to anticipate the next move. "I don't like the silence," Lieutenant Hayes muttered from his post at Tactical, his eyes scanning the empty space on the main display. "Something feels off about their last transmission." It wasn't just a threat. It felt more like a warning. Captain Thompson nodded slowly. She could sense the gravity of the situation. The Scorgian Dominion wasn't just asserting its power. It was testing humanity's resolve. "Send another hail. Increase the signal strength," Thompson ordered, her voice firm but quiet, like the calm before a storm. "Let them know we're serious. They need to understand that we won't back down." Ensign Patel complied, adjusting the ship's communication frequency and amplifying the transmission power. The crew watched as the screen flickered once again. The familiar static waves danced across the display before settling into the same eerie, alien visage of Xalthor, the figure from the first transmission. This time, however, the alien seemed different. Its posture was more rigid, almost imperious, as if this encounter had now moved beyond curiosity and into something far more dangerous. "You have not learned," Xalthor's voice rumbled again, but this time there was an added layer of menace. "You humans are weak, like all other life forms in the galaxy that have dared to defy us. You will be crushed under the weight of our power. Your species has no place among the stars." Captain Thompson took a breath, her resolve strengthening. "You speak of power," she said, her voice cool yet laced with conviction. "But you fail to understand one thing. Humanity's greatest strength isn't in our weapons or our technology. It's in our will. We fight to survive. We fight for our future, and we will never yield to threats." The alien's eyes narrowed, its gaze unblinking. "Your will. It will be crushed under the might of the Scorvian Dominion, just as every other foolish species has been. You are too small, too insignificant." A moment of silence passed, and then, unexpectedly, Zalthor's expression shifted, if it could even be called an expression. There was a slight tilt of its head, and the light from its eyes softened. The change was subtle, but Thompson noticed it immediately. It was almost as if the alien was considering her words more seriously now, a slight pause that hinted at something deeper. "You humans have a strange confidence for a species so young. It intrigues me. We have encountered countless civilizations, and most would have bowed by now. What makes you so different?" Thompson felt a surge of emotion, pride, defiance, and a burning desire to protect her people. "We are different because we refuse to give up," she replied, her voice steady and strong. "You may be ancient, but you have never faced a species like ours. We've risen from the ashes of our own mistakes. We've fought wars, survived pandemics, rebuilt our world. And now we've come to the stars, not as conquerors, but as explorers. We will not be intimidated, and we will not be silenced." Zalthor seemed to consider this, its glowing eyes never leaving the screen. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the soft hum of the ship's engines. The crew held their collective breath, waiting for the alien to respond, fearing that any wrong move could set off the storm that was sure to follow. Finally, Zalthor spoke again, this time with a tone that was not quite amused but certainly less hostile. "You are a curious species, Captain Thompson. You speak with conviction. Perhaps there is something worth considering here. You wish to survive. But survival is not enough. Power is everything. We don't need to be like you to survive," Captain Thompson responded, her voice rising with determination. "We fight for what's right, for freedom, for the future of our species, and we will not stop fighting for that future, no matter who stands in our way." Zalthor's figure remained still for a long time, its alien face unreadable. It was hard to tell whether it was impressed or dismissive, but one thing was clear. This was no longer just a communication between two species. It was a battle of ideologies. "You are strong in spirit, Captain Thompson, but strength alone is not enough to survive. You must learn to respect the power of those who have lived longer than you. The Scorvian Dominion has existed for millennia. We have seen the rise and fall of civilizations, and we have crushed those who dared challenge us." The voice was firm, colder now. "Your species, with all your courage, will not stand against us." But as Zalthor finished speaking, something changed. A strange hum reverberated through the ship, its resonance like an energy pulse, coming from deep within the hull. The crew looked at each other, alarmed. Lieutenant Hayes quickly checked the sensors. "Captain, we're picking up something," he reported, his voice laced with urgency. "There's a strange energy signature emanating from their ship, almost like a signal. It's like they're probing us." Thompson's heart skipped a beat. "Probing? For what?" "I don't know, but it's not just a scan. It feels more like a test." Suddenly, the lights on the Vanguard flickered as the alien ship emitted another powerful energy pulse. For a moment, the screens on the bridge went blank, then came back online with new data. The Scorvian ship had initiated a full lockdown on the Vanguard systems. Communications, navigation, everything. It was as though the alien vessel was hijacking their ship's control. "Get me a manual override," Thompson barked. "We cannot let them control us." The tension in the room reached a boiling point as Ensign Patel scrambled to work the controls, trying to regain some level of control over the ship. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked furiously, the stakes higher than ever. "Captain," Paddle said, his voice trembling slightly. I can't. Their systems are too advanced. Whatever they're doing, it's unlike anything we've encountered." The Scorvian ship had effectively neutralized their ability to respond, to fight back. Captain Thompson knew that their survival, their fate, hung by a thread. "Captain Thompson," Xalthor's voice returned, cold and commanding. "We will not let you threaten the stability of the galaxy. Surrender now, and perhaps we will grant you a swift death. Continue to resist, and you will suffer as all who defy the Dominion have." The Vanguard was powerless, and for the first time in her career, Captain Thompson felt the crushing weight of defeat press down on her. But in the depths of her being, she knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. "We'll never surrender," she said, her voice firm. "Humanity doesn't know how to give up." The Scorvian ship systems may have been powerful, but they had underestimated one thing: humanity's capacity for ingenuity. As the crew of the Vanguard scrambled for solutions, Thompson stared at the alien ship on the screen, a challenge burning in her eyes. She would find a way out of this. Humanity would find a way. And this story, she swore, would not end here. Not today. The heart of resistance. The Vanguard groaned as it drifted in space, a giant in chains. Captain Thompson stared at the frozen displays, her heart pounding in her chest. The alien ship, Xalthor's vessel, had shackled them, and she could feel every fiber of her being screaming in protest. This wasn't just an attack on the ship, it was an attack on everything they stood for. Humanity's courage, its resilience, its drive to defy the impossible. Her mind raced through 1,000 possibilities. The Vanguard systems were down. The crew was at risk. But there was something in Thompson, something that refused to break, something that had been honed through years of fighting for survival. It was a primal, raw force, the force that made humanity different. "Captain," Lieutenant Hayes said, his voice low, breaking through her thoughts. "The Scorvian ship it's locked onto us. They're controlling everything. We're completely at their mercy." Thompson turned slowly, her gaze unwavering. "We're not at their mercy. Not yet. I need a full diagnostic now." Ensign Patel and Lieutenant Hayes exchanged a look but obeyed without question. Patel's hands flew over the controls, furiously typing commands into the interface. His brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm accessing the backup systems, Captain. If we can't use the main controls, we'll have to rely on manual overrides. But it'll take time." Thompson nodded. "How much time?" "It's hard to say," Patel admitted, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Their systems are sophisticated. We're up against an enemy that's millions of years ahead of us technologically." "Enough," Thompson cut him off. "We have no time for doubt. Get to work." She turned back to the screen, where Xalthor's menacing figure appeared again, this time with an even colder expression. The alien's voice echoed through the bridge, more powerful, more confident than ever. "You have no options left, Captain Thompson. Your ship is ours. Surrender now, and your people will be spared. Resist, and the annihilation of your species will be swift. You cannot fight the Dominion. We are the end of your kind." Captain Thompson's grip on the armrest of her chair tightened. Xalthor's words were venomous, designed to break her spirit. But in the face of such despair, something inside her sparked, a fire that wouldn't die. "I told you before," she said, her voice low but filled with unwavering determination. "We don't surrender. We fight. Always." A strange flicker passed across Xalthor's face, almost like surprise, but the alien quickly masked it. "You will learn, Captain Thompson. You will learn that your resistance is futile. We do not make threats. We deliver on them." "Then you don't understand us," Thompson said. "Because humanity never backs down. You may control the ship, but you will never control our will." There was a long silence. For a moment, it almost seemed like Xalthor was going to say something more, but then the transmission cut off, and the screens went blank once more. Thompson stood abruptly, the weight of the situation bearing down on her. She walked across the bridge with purpose, her mind already calculating their next move. She could feel her crew's eyes on her, waiting for a sign that there was hope, hope that she refused to relinquish. "Captain," Ensign Patel said, his voice filled with a mix of awe and anxiety. "I've managed to access the auxiliary power grid. It's a long shot, but I think we can override their system from within. It'll require all hands, but we may be able to reboot the communication system and send out a distress signal." "Do it," Thompson said immediately. "But make sure we're ready for what comes next. We need a backup plan in case they retaliate before we're fully operational again." The crew worked in silent urgency, moving quickly, their faces drawn with the same steely resolve that had brought them this far. Lieutenant Hayes manned the communications, fingers moving over the console with precision. Patel was at the auxiliary controls, bypassing systems one by one to regain control. It was clear they were working against the clock, but with each passing minute, they felt like they were inching toward a faint glimmer of hope. But the Scorvian ship was far from idle. Outside the Vanguard, the monstrous alien vessel loomed like a predator circling its prey. Its sleek, dark hull pulsed with energy, an ominous reminder of the sheer power it commanded. But what the Scorvians failed to understand, what they had grossly underestimated, was humanity's unparalleled ingenuity and unity. "We don't give up. We never give up." Thompson repeated the mantra in her mind as she moved toward the weapons station. "Lieutenant Hayes, can we get a status on the defensive systems?" Hayes turned, his expression tense. "I'm not sure, Captain. Their lockdown has disabled most of our weapons, but there's a chance, just a slim one. We could activate the ion cannons if we can re-establish control over the power grid. I want all systems fully operational in 20 minutes, Hayes. Do whatever it takes." The crew knew that time was running out. The Scorvians could strike at any moment, and if they did, there might not be another chance to fight back. But the heart of humanity beat within the Vanguard, and for every second they held on, for every scrap of resistance they clawed together, their chances of survival grew stronger. Thompson turned back to the view screen, her gaze fixed on the alien ship. It was massive, terrifying in its size and power, but she would never bow to it. Not while she had a breath left in her body. "Captain," Ensign Patel's voice cut through the tension once again. "We've almost got the comms back online. One more push." Thompson's eyes narrowed. She could feel the weight of the entire galaxy pressing down on them. But in this moment, she felt the power of humanity, its indomitable spirit. They had come so far. They had fought their way to the stars, and no alien race would take that away from them. "Ensign," she said, her voice steady, "get that signal out. We need help." "Yes, Captain." The crew worked together as one. Their movements were swift, synchronized, a single entity, united by the same cause. And slowly but surely, the systems began to hum back to life. The comms crackled, static filling the air, then clearing. A fresh transmission window appeared on the main screen. It was faint, barely audible, but unmistakably human. "This is the Vanguard." Captain Thompson's voice came through, steady and strong. "We are under attack by the Scorvian Dominion. We request immediate assistance. We are not surrendering. Humanity will not fall without a fight." The message was out, but would it be enough? The Scorvian ship, sensing the shift in momentum, unleashed another pulse of energy, this time aimed at the Vanguard's shields. The bridge trembled violently as the blast hit, shaking the crew to their core. But against all odds, the shields held, just barely. "We're still here," Lieutenant Hayes gritted, his face bruised but unbroken. Captain Thompson smiled grimly. "And we'll stay here until we've won." There was no turning back now. The battle had truly begun. The Vanguard was alive, and humanity's fight for its future was far from over. The reckoning. The Vanguard groaned as it shifted violently in space, the Scorvian energy pulse still rattling its hull. The crew clung to their positions, battered by the force of the blast, but refusing to yield. Captain Thompson stood tall at the center of the bridge, her heart pounding as she processed the surge of data flashing before her. She had felt hope flicker when the distress signal went out, but the Scorvian response had been immediate and unforgiving. The Vanguard was limping, but it wasn't finished yet. "Captain," Lieutenant Hayes said, his voice tense as he scanned the readings, "they've locked on to our defensive systems again. We've lost control of the ion cannons. It's a direct link to their flagship. If we don't break the connection soon, they'll disable everything." "We need to break free," Thompson muttered under her breath. "We need to fight." Ensign Patel stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "Captain, the auxiliary power grid is nearly up. I can reinitiate some systems manually, but I'll need more time." Thompson held up her hand, cutting him off. "Make it happen, Patel. Whatever it takes. We don't have time for delays." Her crew worked furiously, their movements calculated and precise, but the Scorvian ship wasn't giving them any room to breathe. Every time they tried to push forward, the enemy retaliated with more force. The Vanguard was trapped in a cycle of desperation, struggling for every inch of control it could reclaim. But Thompson had one thing the Scorvians could never anticipate: the unwavering will of her crew. "We have to start thinking bigger," Thompson said, her voice sharp. "If we can't break free through brute force, we'll do it through strategy. The Scorvians underestimated us. They think we're just a ship, just a crew of soldiers, outgunned and outclassed. They're wrong." Lieutenant Hayes looked up from his console, his eyes meeting hers. "You have an idea, Captain." "I do," Thompson said, her eyes narrowing. "They control the systems now, but we can use their own arrogance against them. Let's force them into a situation where they have to act first. We'll bait them into making a mistake." The crew exchanged looks of uncertainty, but it was clear that none of them had any intention of second-guessing her. Thompson was their captain. She was the heart of their resistance, and as long as she was leading them, they would fight. "Here's the plan," Thompson said, her voice low and commanding. "We're going to let them think they've won. We're going to appear as though we're completely powerless, like we've given up. We'll lower our shields, cut off all our systems, and let them think they've broken us. When they move in to finish us off, that's when we strike." Lieutenant Hayes' eyes widened. "But Captain, if we shut down everything, we'll be vulnerable." "Exactly," Thompson replied with a hard smile. "But only for a moment. The moment they think they've won, we'll take them by surprise. We'll hack into their systems from the inside and turn their own weaponry against them." It was a bold move, one that carried enormous risk. But in that moment, Captain Thompson knew that it was the only chance they had. The Scorvians had underestimated the power of human resilience, and they were about to find out just how far that would take them. The crew immediately got to work. Patel began shutting down the Vanguard systems, meticulously disabling everything that could give away their plan. The ship grew eerily silent, the hum of machinery fading as the crew took their positions, preparing for the moment when everything would fall apart, only to be turned around in an instant. Far from over. Outside, the Scorvian ship loomed ever larger, its presence a constant reminder of the looming danger. The alien vessel's dark silhouette filled the screen, its pulse lasers ready to strike at any sign of resistance. But Thompson kept her gaze steady, her heart unshaken. "We're ready, Captain," Hayes said, his voice tight with anticipation. Thompson nodded, her expression set in determination. This is it. The Vanguard powered down completely, a quiet stillness overtaking the bridge. The crew held their breath. The Scorvian flagship moved into position, its weapons primed and ready. Through the view screen, Thompson could see the moment of victory in the eyes of the alien fleet. They were coming in for the kill. And just when it seemed all hope was lost, the Vanguard sprang to life. "Now, Patel." "Activate the override," Thompson shouted. The bridge erupted into action as Paddle slammed his hands onto the control panel, feeding the override code into the system. The ship's dormant systems roared back to life, faster than the Scorvians had anticipated. The shields came back online just as the Scorvian ship fired its final blast, and the Vanguard's ion cannons fired back, this time with brutal precision. The Scorvian ship rocked as their own energy weapons turned against them, unleashing waves of destructive force. The Vanguard wasn't just surviving anymore, it was fighting back with fury. "Direct hit, Captain," Hayes called out, his voice full of disbelief. "The Scorvian ship is taking damage." Thompson's heart surged with triumph. This is just the beginning. But the battle was far from over. The Scorvian flagship, though wounded, was still formidable. It retaliated fiercely, launching a wave of drones that swarmed the Vanguard like angry bees. The alien ship wasn't going to let its prey escape so easily. "We've got incoming," Lieutenant Hayes shouted as the smaller drones launched from the Scorvian vessel. The Vanguard's shields flickered as the drones pounded against it, their weapons chipping away at the protective layers. "Keep firing," Thompson ordered. "We're not backing down now." The crew fought like they'd never fought before, each person giving their all to keep the Vanguard standing. Patel was working frantically to maintain the shields while Hayes coordinated the defense. The sound of gunfire, explosions, and the crackle of energy blasts filled the bridge as the Vanguard fought for its survival. But just when it seemed like they couldn't take any more, the tide began to turn. The Scorvian drones, now scattered and disorganized, fell apart under the onslaught of the Vanguard's weaponry. The alien flagship was heavily damaged, its once pristine hull now riddled with blast marks and cracks. And then, as if to add insult to injury, the distress signal Thompson had sent out earlier finally reached its destination. A fleet of human reinforcements emerged from the depths of space, their ships glowing brightly against the void. They had arrived. Thompson's breath caught in her throat. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The cavalry had arrived. "All ships, engage the Scorvian fleet." The voice of Admiral Jenkins crackled over the comms. "For humanity." The Vanguard, though battered and bruised, stood strong. It wasn't just the ship that had been repaired in that moment. It was humanity's spirit. And now, it was time to finish what they had started. The Scorvian flagship, despite its desperate efforts, couldn't withstand the combined assault. In a final, explosive burst, the mighty ship was destroyed, its pieces scattering across space like broken dreams. The crew of the Vanguard watched in stunned silence as the battle came to an end. They had done it. They had turned the tide and sent a clear message to the Scorvian Dominion. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Captain Thompson leaned back in her chair, her eyes filled with exhaustion, but there was a flicker of pride there too. Humanity had fought. They had survived. And in the end, they had won. But as the wreckage of the Scorvian fleet drifted away into the blackness of space, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was just the beginning. The battle for humanity's place in the stars was far. The aftermath. The victory over the Scorvian fleet was hard won, but it left the Vanguard and her crew battered and bruised. The once pristine decks of the ship were littered with debris, and the usual hum of the engines had been replaced with an eerie silence as the crew tended to the aftermath of the battle. Fires were still smoldering in various compartments, while engineering teams scrambled to stabilize vital systems. Captain Thompson stood in the middle of the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the stars outside. The Vanguard was limping home, but they had made it. They had defied impossible odds, and for a moment, it felt as though the very cosmos had opened up to them, offering its dark embrace to those who dared to face it. The sound of footsteps behind her made her turn. "Captain," Lieutenant Hayes said, his voice somber, "we've accounted for all the crew, and there were no major casualties, but the Vanguard is going to need extensive repairs if we're going to take on another fleet." "We'll make it work," Thompson interrupted, cutting him off before he could finish his thought. Her gaze remained fixed on the stars, though her mind was racing. We've done the impossible. We survived the Scorpions, but there's more out there, Hayes. I know it. Hayes sighed, his hand running through his short-cropped hair. You think they'll send another fleet? Or worse, they'll send something bigger. Thompson didn't respond right away. She wanted to say no, to offer reassurance, but her gut told her the Scorpions wouldn't let this defeat go unanswered. They'd come back. They had to. In war, there were no true victories, just moments of survival. Whatever comes, we'll be ready, she finally said, turning to face her officer. Her expression was hard as stone. Prepare for what's next. Over the next few days, the Vanguard drifted through space, its crew recovering from their wounds, both physical and emotional. They had fought and triumphed, but they were still scared from the experience. Thompson spent her nights staring at the stars, thinking about what lay ahead, while her crew tried to process the battle's aftermath. Meanwhile, across the universe, the Scorpion Empire was reeling from their defeat. The once invincible fleet had been shattered, and their flagship was gone, reduced to floating debris. But in the far corners of the galaxy, dark whispers began to spread. Humanity has made a statement, a voice murmured in the shadowed corridors of the Scorpion High Command. They've earned our respect, but that is not enough. A figure stood in the center of the room, his eyes glowing a faint red. His face was marked with the scars of many battles, but his expression was one of quiet fury. We will rebuild. We will strike again. And this time, we will not underestimate them. Admiral Arjan, the leader of the Scorpion forces, clenched his fists. He could still taste the bitter defeat that had been inflicted upon him. The humans think they've won. They believe they've broken us. His voice was filled with venom. But this time, we will break them. We will make them regret their victory. Back on the Vanguard, Thompson was well aware that the war was far from over. Though they had outlasted the Scorpions' initial assault, she knew the Empire wouldn't let this loss stand. It was only a matter of time before they came for humanity again. We need to prepare ourselves for the next wave, Thompson told her crew. We can't afford to let our guard down. As she walked down the corridors of the ship, Thompson's mind was consumed with calculations and strategy. They had made a name for themselves, but that only painted a target on their backs. The Scorpions would come, and this time, they would bring everything they had. But it wasn't just the Scorpions that kept Thompson awake at night. There were whispers among the crew, too, whispers of a new reality. With humanity's unexpected triumph, there were questions about their place in the galaxy. Would they remain the underdogs, or had they just opened the door to something far greater than anyone had imagined? Lieutenant Hayes joined her later that day, handing her a data pad with the latest intelligence report. We've received signals from several frontier colonies, he said, his voice filled with disbelief. They've been watching the battle, Captain. Some of them are asking for help. Thompson raised an eyebrow. Help. From us. We've become something more than just survivors, Captain, Hayes said quietly. We've become a symbol. The victory over the Scorpions. It's resonated with more than just the military. The civilians, the fringe colonies, they see us as the spark of hope. If we can stand against an empire like the Scorpions, then maybe they can stand up too. Thompson didn't know how to respond. She had been so focused on the immediate threat that she hadn't considered the long-term consequences of their actions. Humanity's victory had, perhaps, been more than just a military triumph. It was the first spark of rebellion in a galaxy that had long been dominated by the Scorpion Empire. And now, that spark was growing. Maybe we don't just need to prepare for another attack, Thompson said slowly, her mind racing. Maybe we need to prepare to lead something bigger. A movement. A coalition. Hayes nodded, his eyes intense. We could be the rallying point for every system that's been oppressed by the Scorpions. The implications were enormous. If humanity became the beacon of resistance, it would mean more than just military conflict. It would ignite a galaxy-wide revolution. The Scorvians would come for them with everything they had, but the vanguard would stand at the forefront of something far larger than any of them had ever expected. "You're right," Thompson said, her voice steady. "Prepare the crew. We're going to have to make contact with these frontier systems. If they want to fight, we'll be ready to lead them. But we need to do this carefully. We need allies, not enemies. We don't want to become a target for every faction in the galaxy." Hayes's gaze sharpened. "Understood, Captain. I'll reach out to the colonies and set up initial communications." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The Vanguard's communication systems buzzed with messages from the frontier colonies, some hopeful, some fearful, all uncertain. Many were unsure of what this new alliance might mean. But for the first time, there was hope. Real, tangible hope that the Scorvian Empire could be brought to its knees. As the crew worked tirelessly to forge these new connections, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something huge. The Scorvians had made a critical error in underestimating humanity's resilience. They had crushed countless civilizations before, but they had never faced what was coming. Humanity was no longer just a player in the game. It was now a force to be reckoned with. And Captain Thompson, she was about to lead them into a new era, one where resistance was not only possible, but inevitable. In the shadows of space, the Scorvian Empire was already planning its next move. But this time, when they came for humanity, they would find more than just a lone starship to destroy. They would find a galaxy united in resistance.